Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 527. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this podcast since 2005. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this podcast since 2005. Today, we're talking with returning guest Annie Mahon. Now, I invited her back onto the podcast. She's been on here a couple times before and has so much to share with regard to mindfulness, living a mindful life, and how mindfulness has helped her. So you're going to hear about how she used mindfulness to get through a health crisis, how it's changed how she's living now, and the lessons that she's learned. Now, you'll find the show notes at kimberlywilson.com/527. And be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you may be using, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, Overcast, etc. I've got links to all these in the show notes. And also, if you have a moment to pen a review, I would be so very grateful. My hope is that you are learning a lot about ways to incorporate tranquility into your life with the TDJ tenets, right? Mindfulness, which is one of our tenets clearly today, style, creativity, wellness, and compassion. Now, those of you who are new to Tranquility du Jour, a big, big welcome, and you can learn more about Tranquility du Jour and our online community over at kimberlywilson.com/new. Also, save the dates. We've got lots coming up this spring. March 21st is our TDJ Live 1-hour free masterclass. We've got March 27th, freshly announced, the TDJ Style Pop-Up, where I'm going to be talking all about creating and styling a capsule wardrobe. And then April 3rd is our next half-day virtual retreat. Would love to have you with us. Now, without further ado, the lovely Annie is a white Armenian-American ordained layperson in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, founder of Circle Yoga Cooperative, DC Community Yoga and DC Yoga Week, and the Pink House Foundation, a grant-making organization supporting the development, political, and social capital for marginalized groups in the United States, moving land, wealth, and power to historically oppressed groups. Opening Heart Mindfulness Community, and most recently, Making Visible, an ongoing webinar series grounded in mindfulness and led by those most impacted by issues of social injustice and internal biases. Annie's been a student of mindfulness since the early 1990s. In her book, which I interviewed her on a few years ago, Things I Did When I Was Hangry, Navigating a Peaceful Relationship with Food, was published in 2015. You can learn more about the lovely Annie over in the show notes, and you can find her at rawmindfulness.com. Welcome back, Annie. It's such a treat, as always, to have you on the show.
It's so great to be here. It's just so lovely to see you after so long.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
And listeners, we are recording via video, and that's why she can see me. And I used to just do this via audio. And so it's so nice to be able to have the eye contact with guests. And, you know, Annie, I wanted to reach out after I read your article in the Elephant Journal, which was just so beautifully written. And oh my gosh, I had no idea you were going through this. And so you recently went through a big health scare. And of course, this happens during COVID, which just amplifies everything. And so tell us a little bit about what's happened for you over these past few months.
Yeah, well, it was a big surprise. I had a call from my OBGYN on May 1st. And she said, okay, well, it's the news we don't want to get because I've gone in for a biopsy based on some symptoms I was having. And right away, so what I wrote about in this article is that I was so happy to see right away I was able to bring my mindfulness in, even in that first phone call. And so I was like, okay, I'm okay. And I said to her, well, is it the kind of news that's going to kill me? Or is it kind of news that I'm just going to have to deal with? And she said, it's probably not going to kill you. So it's just, you're going to have to go through some stuff. And I was like, well, then I'm okay. Because I know based on my mindfulness practice that I can get through whatever it is using my practice. So, so I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, and I went in, I got in miraculously because I thought with COVID, I wouldn't get in to get surgery very quickly, but I got right in within a week. Like a week from that call, I had my surgery. And, it was very strange because I was dropped off at the door for my surgery by my husband, and no one else could come in because of COVID. And anyway, I did have it removed, and I can go into more of like how I use my mindfulness, but I had the cancer was removed, and they did suggest that I go through radiation treatment. And so I did that as well. And then as soon as that was finished at the end of July, I drove with my husband to Florida and just soaked in the salt water and for healing for 2 weeks. And then since I've been back, I've been for a checkup and everything is fine. And I'm good. For now, I have to go regularly for checkups, but I'm good. No cancer.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's the big picture story. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, how scary, but I love how you're like, okay, well, is this kind of news where it's going to kill me, right? Where it's like the end of the world, or it can feel that way, or is this manageable?
Right. And I knew if it was going to kill me, then I also had tools for that, but they were going to be different tools. So I was like, okay, if this is going to kill me, okay, but I'll just need to like prepare for that. And if it's not going to kill me, then I can be a little more loose and be like, okay, let's think about what kind of mindfulness tools will be helpful.
Right, right. So tell me kind of initially, like what mindfulness, tools in particular you brought in, and how, you have decades of mindfulness practice. So this has to have been incredibly helpful for you especially as your husband's dropping you off going like, have a good day, right?
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, the first thing that happened was I was able to be with my breath right away on the first phone call. I was able to be like, okay, here I am. I'm breathing. I'm alive. Everything's okay. I didn't go to that place where I might have gone to in the past before I had a practice of just like panic and just like dissociate. So I really was able to just be like, okay, I'm here having a call from my doctor who's saying I have cancer and I can deal with that. So that was the first thing. And then even as the process of calling the doctors and figuring out where I was going to go and when, I really didn't have the kind of anxiety that I might have had. I was definitely more able to just trust the process. And for whatever reason, she gave me 4 doctors' names. The first one that she suggested highest was the one who ended up calling me back, even though I called all 4. So I was like, well, that's interesting. And I thought that I wouldn't get in with the one that she recommended, but I got right in and was able to get right in and get the surgery. So that was one thing. The biggest practice that I really worked with during this whole time, someone had mentioned to me that they had had a surgery and that they had practiced gratitude during their time with going in and everything, going in and seeing the nurses. And so I started right off the bat of just every time I was in the doctor's office and when I went for the surgery and even with the radiation, I just looked at the person who I was dealing with and I thought, you know what? They went through years of training and effort, and they have given so much of their life to be a better doctor or nurse or whatever it was for me. Like, what a gift they are giving me. Like, this is amazing. Like, I could really just feel that, like, even if the doctor, like the surgeon was very surgeon-like, not super warm and friendly, but I was just like, yeah, but he has studied so hard and done so much of this. And all of that is kind of like, I think of my spiritual teacher. When I think of my spiritual teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, I think of all the years of practice that is a gift for me. That he did it so that, yes, he could be more content and more awake, but he also did it so he could pass it on. And so I look at the doctors and nurses the same way and think, they did all this hard work and study and practice so that they could be here for me and other people, of course. And so I generated so much gratitude in every single appointment. And especially I did it a lot during the pre-surgery time. So I when I was dropped off alone, because that was really weird. I was like, okay, I'm in here alone. And I had just gone through something similar with my sister. I had gone out there. She had a hysterectomy. They thought she could potentially have precancerous endometrial, but it wasn't. But they had done a hysterectomy, and I was there in the room, like getting her ready and like that, because it was right before COVID hit. So I was now on the other side, but nobody was there, like, holding my hand and like helping me get through it. So, but this practice of just looking at these nurses and being like, wow, everything they've ever are offering me is just so kind. Like, here's a warm blanket, and here's and it turned out I had a guided meditation I wanted to listen to a bunch of times before the surgery. It turned out I didn't even have time to hear it once because the nurses wouldn't leave my room. They just wanted to chat and tell me all the things I need to know right after and hear. And if I hadn't had that time, I would have been a lot worse off after, because they were just telling me so many secrets that I needed to know. And so I just was so happy. And then when the anesthesiologist came in, it was the same. I was like, wow, this person is, they're being so careful and they really want to take care of me. And that really changed my whole outlook, because I'm not naturally, like, from childhood, like, I grew up in a very suspicious kind of family and mistrusting. And normally, not so much recently, but in the past, I would think, can I trust that person? And here I just was like, no, they've done so much to get here, and I'm so grateful.
And let's be honest, when the anesthesiologist arrives, it's like, yes, it's like, yes, it's all going to be fine now.
It's going to be okay. Yes, exactly.
No, but I love it. I do love kind of the reminder of how gratitude, can be such a beautiful practice, especially during these really challenging times.
Yeah, because the other option would be me just sitting there going, oh my God, is it going to be okay? And is this person going to be able to take care of me? And am I going to be, just this constant ruminating could have been there. But instead, I literally went into surgery just happy, like feeling like, this is so great. Everyone's so taking care of me. And isn't this wonderful? And yeah, so it made a big difference in how I felt.
Well, and kind of with mindfulness and the ability to really tune into and pay attention to your body, like, I'm curious, that must have contributed even to you going to the doctor initially, right? Of just recognizing like something just feels a little off.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty big. It wasn't something you could mistake. So it was more just like, oh, this isn't right. Something's wrong. It was pretty obvious. And I went in to her, and actually I went in to see her, and I don't want to be graphic, but I went in to see her, and she had to do a biopsy right then because it was COVID. First of all, it was COVID. And then she's like, come right in. I want you to come right in. I was like, thank you. So I came in, and this is my OBGYN that I've had for 20 years and love. And she's like, yeah, it's good you came in. It's really good you came in. You could either wait to go to the hospital and go under to get this biopsy, or we could just do it right now. And in the office. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, well, I want to do it. But she's like, yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. No one else was in the office. So she was doing this biopsy, which was very, very painful. And I was singing. Like, that was how I handled it. I was just like, each time I was like, la, 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 la. And she was like, that's fine. That's better than most people are swearing at me if I do this, But I just was like, yeah. In the past, again, like that tightening that we get naturally, I didn't have that. I was able to just be like, I'm going to get through this, and I'll just do what my body wants, which was to like sing at the top of my lungs, and not a song, but just like, high pitched.
It's so funny you say that, because I recently had my annual, and I'm like, this is the worst, and she was like, well, at least you didn't sing. She said, one time I had an opera singer in, and she and then she sang in it. So it's so funny you say singing, because it's like, it probably does help, right? It just kind of relaxes. And yet,
it does. And I was like, are you done? And she's like, no, I'm not quite done yet. I'm like, all right. I don't know, that just worked for me. So
I love it.
yeah.
So apparently it's a common thing that people will do that.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Whatever works.
Exactly. Exactly. So.
Now, what lessons would you say? Okay, so this was in May, and then did you go through all the treatment May, June? When were you through?
No, I did the surgery was the main treatment. And then unfortunately I did get a fever and infection. I had to go back to the ER that next week. So that was like later in May, I was there. And that was tense just because of COVID to be in the ER, but, I was okay. They gave me antibiotics. I was fine. And then, they didn't really want to start the, radiation until a certain number of weeks after. So that was in July. I spent 3 weeks in July going twice a week to get this radiation. And it turned out I got on the call with the Zoom call with my radiologist, who everyone had raved about. Oh, you're going to love her. She's going to love her. You're going to love her. So great. We'll turn on the thing. And she was like, oh, it's you. And I'm like, oh, it was one of my mindfulness students.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Cause I didn't make the connection by her last name. Anyway, so that was interesting. And awesome. And she was awesome. And so all of July, I focused on that. And then I was done. Very end of July. I was complete.
And so, looking at this a few months later, what would you say are some lessons or kind of takeaways from this experience?
Yeah. So the biggest takeaway is that you just don't know what's going to happen. It's just any moment, anything can happen in your body, in the world. But, just to really be aware that any day you could get that call, or I could get that call, and just know that that could be it. And that might be the end. And, that's been helpful to really just keep that in the forefront of my mind. So people would ask me like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm doing great because I don't have cancer anymore. It's like, so it gave me like an added boost of like, yay, this is so great that I don't have cancer now. And that I got through it. So that is one big thing. Another big thing is that, I can trust my practice. So there's been a few times in my life where my practice has been, tested like that. And another time was when I was teaching yoga. So a long time ago, like maybe, 10 or more years ago, and someone came in with a newspaper article to our class. It was a class that was very coherent. We were always the same people on a Tuesday morning. And she came in and she handed me this newspaper article that said that one of our students had been murdered over the weekend. And I went into total panic mode. I was just like, oh my God, I love this woman. I just was like, and she just handed it to me. So I got up and I left the room immediately because I didn't know what to do. And I said to myself, this is when the rubber hits the road with the practice, so turn to your practice. And so I immediately went outside and did mindful walking, did some walking meditation, and just breathing and just, what do I need to be doing right now? Where do I need to be putting myself? And I got clarity, the Buddha spoke to me or whoever and was like, yeah, you need to go back to the class because the class needs you. That class needs to hold together because this has happened. And so I went back into the classroom and we had a class and we talked about it and, there were tears and we didn't know a lot about what had happened yet, but it was a really important moment for me to see this practice can really work. And so this was another moment where I was like, this practice really works. This practice will save me, because it literally is like a life preserver. If I hadn't had that, I don't know, I would have just been a disaster and miserable. And I would have made myself more miserable and probably been angry that I got cancer. And now I feel great. So yes, so the practice works.
Yeah. And whenever you say the practice, just for our listeners who may not know so much about kind of your practice, can you share what you're referencing whenever you say the practice?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean my
okay.
mindfulness practice. So, which means a lot of different things, but basically it's the practice of being present in the moment, to staying in the present as much as possible and being aware of what's happening inside of me and around me and allowing that to lead me to more understanding and compassion. So that's sort of a quick sum up, but there's so much more than that. But I've been studying with Thich Nhat Hanh since the mid 90s, started with books, but then I went on my first retreat in 1999. And so that's my main direction of my practice, but I'm also a very committed 12-stepper. So that's part of my spiritual practice. And I was raised in the Christian tradition, so that's still in the background. But all of that, I would say, when I say practice, I mean my spiritual practice.
And can you give us just an inside peek on a daily basis? Kind of what does your practice look like?
Yeah. So right here where I'm sitting is I have an altar, and I have an ancestral altar, which is kind of new because I had a recent dream connection with an ancestor, which has been awesome. But basically I get up between 5 and 6 at the latest. And I come, after I make my tea, I come and journal a little bit, and using just some various books. It changes over time. And then at 6:15, I sit and I do meditation until 6:45. And at 6:45, I get on a Zoom call chanting, which has been a big piece of my COVID practice, because one of the former monastics of Thich Nhat Hanh at Plum Village started a 6:45 a.m. chanting practice on Zoom back in March. And I have missed fully 2 times in that whole, 9-10 months. Once was the morning I was in the hospital and I wanted to get on, but I fell asleep. And then once was another day. I can't remember what happened with that one, but I almost never miss it. And it's a chanting practice. So it's like we chant the songs from the Plum Village tradition. And then we also have a time where we send metta, we send loving kindness to people who are suffering. And so I do that. I love that part of it. And then I do some social media before I get up. Usually, putting out something mindfulness related. And then I walk my dogs, and that's part of it, is to get outside and to be in touch. And sometimes I will listen to a Dharma talk while I'm walking, but sometimes I just try to just be walking. And then I also do, I'm interacting with people from the community all the time. That's a big part because I've co-founded this community. And so I spend a lot of time talking about the practice and teaching about the practice during the day. And then on Monday evenings, our community meets online. And then there are other evenings I join other communities, or else we have a Making Visible community, which is another mindfulness-based program that I'm organizing on learning about the suffering of other communities. So we have had one on immigration, we've had one on anti-Black racism, and LGBTQIA was our last series. And so that's another form of practice that we do it in a mindfulness tradition. So basically all day long, thank God, because it takes that much to keep me on track. I need to be always reminded.
Absolutely. No, I love it. Thank you. And, one of the things that you were talking about before you started recording about how diet and exercise has shifted since then. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've always been, a yogi, and I love to move. I ran track when I was younger, and I've loved movement. I love to dance. But when I hit menopause, everything kind of slowed down in a way, and I just started to get a lot of fatigue, and I stopped doing a lot of more bigger movement. Like I was still doing some yoga for sure, but not sweating very often. And my diet was okay. I've been a vegetarian for many, many years, but then I started eating meat because I was just with this fatigue thing. The naturopath wanted me to have some meat, so I had started doing that. And then when this happened, after I came through the treatment, I realized, okay, I really need to look at why would I get this. For one thing, I do have a genetic condition that I found out that my mother and my aunt, who also had uterine cancer, probably had. So that's one thing. But why did it trigger? What was it about my way of life? And there were several things I looked at, but for sure, I found this book called Keto for Cancer. And I worked with this woman on for 2 months being on a strict keto diet just to see it. Supposedly, it helps to allow the cells that need to get flushed out. But it is kind of meat heavy. So I'm not thrilled. I wasn't thrilled about that. So now I'm trying to be more like keto vegan or, but there's still some meat and fish involved, but I'm trying. I really, really want to get back to that, but I don't know. I'm trying because I really do care so much about animals and suffering. And that's important to me. So I feel sad about eating animals, but I'm working toward getting back to vegetarian/vegan. So that was the diet. And then the exercise, I just started ramping it up. I was like, everything I read, everything I listen to, I am like obsessed with listening to podcasts about like health, or it was, and cancer and like what makes it happen. Everything is like exercise. It like really clears out your system. The movement, the heating up of the body, but also the movement, and especially in terms of like glucose, like getting rid of the glucose. And that's been a big thing. I've been measuring my glucose and my ketones and just really reset myself in a healthier way. And I didn't mean to lose weight, but I lost to like 25 pounds and, that felt really good. And I was like, oh, just because I've been eating and exercising better. So it was one of those things where it's like the frog. Oh, that's a bad example, but the frog in the hot water.
Yeah.
It's like that though. It's like slow. I didn't realize like how, and I have so much more energy now. And that just feels really good. So for me, that was one of the biggest gifts. It was like to reset my health and be like, okay, no, I'm back on top of it. So.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, and it's impressive that you lost 25 pounds during COVID in particular, because I think for so many people, Annie, there will be times where I'll look at my phone and I'm like, I got 40 steps today. And okay, I haven't carried it around the house everywhere I went, but you're just like, that's unacceptable, because we're so used to like walking everywhere and so much. And, if I'm not walking the dogs that day, then it's sad. And even, ideally 10,000 steps. I mean, I'm like, wow, I got 3,500 today, and that's still pathetic, at least for, I think trying to stay active and engaged. So it is really interesting, how you have to be really mindful and intentional with that. Otherwise, we can easily, particularly in COVID times, but just become quite lethargic.
Totally. Well, and I also started following, my husband has always been weird. I've thought weird about like his eating and exercise. Like he has a walking desk and he will literally walk 15 to 20 miles a day on that thing. And he also like does intermittent fasting. He's done it. So I started like trying intermittent fasting. So I just eat lunch and dinner. That has been great too and given me more energy. And I decided I'll do some walking on the tread. So when I do Zoom calls in the afternoon, like this one, no, but other ones where it's like a meeting format, I'll be on the treadmill and just walking slowly while I'm on the call. And that has helped a lot too, because what I understand is that the more you take breaks to move is better, because the longer period of sedentariness is the worst. So if you even are sitting for a while, but then you get up and move and then you sit again, that's better. So I'm trying to do that. For a while I was trying, I have on my phone, on my Spotify, I have a playlist called Dance Break. And I was trying to just like put a song on from there and just get up and dance around my office just to like move it around. Yeah.
Yeah, so. I love it. Yeah, it's funny because, my big thing, and I think for a lot of people, is just doing a lot of virtual classes. So I've taken up ballet during COVID. Well, I've been doing ballet for a few years, but now I've been doing it almost daily. Wow. And, I was unable to do daily to get to Washington Ballet and back to my home. That was a 2.5-hour adventure, and so now it's like, well, ballet in 5 minutes. All right, let me get my shoes on, and so it's just been really, really nice. But I hear you. I mean, it's like, okay, how can I get up, even if you just have a 15-minute break during the day, get up, walk, get outside, move, do jumping jacks. I mean, anything, get that heart rate up, dance, as you said. Yeah.
I bought a little mini trampoline too. They have outside the back door that if it's a nice day, I might go just do that for like 5 or 10 minutes just to move things around.
That's great. That's so
Yeah.
smart. I mean, we really do have to, I've seen these little things that go under the desk where it's like you could like like little
Yes.
exercise bikes under the desk. It's amazing what, people have come up with, but I do think it is so, so important. So thank you for emphasizing that as just a good reminder. And 35 or 65 steps a day is just not acceptable unless you are recovering from surgery and cannot move.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious.
Oh, so, well, Annie, before I ask you my last question, which you probably know because you've been on the podcast before, but is there anything else that you would like to share about kind of this experience or, particularly having gone through this experience during COVID that you think might be insightful to our listeners?
Well, I do think this time has like created some kind of space for more practice for some of us, at least. I know not everybody can avail themselves of that, but it does make it easier, as you said, to join a class or to join a community that's practicing meditation together, or to have more time that you're not commuting somewhere, that you could use that time to practice. But I also think that the practices of mindfulness and other spiritual practices are easier when we have other people there. So that is tricky just when we're alone. That's why having the online classes and online communities is so important, and being able to do that. I find that I don't enjoy teaching and leading community online as much, but I'm getting better at it. I just find it harder to feel people's energies. But I know it's so important, and we get people from all over the world coming to things that we offer because people are looking for more community. So I guess I would say, yeah, if it feels like difficult to find time to meditate or to do exercise or whatever it is, then to tune into a group, because a group really does make a difference. And there is a sense, I know some people feel kind of isolated from others, especially people who live alone. I think is hard. So I do think that's real, that we really as human beings need each other in a kind of way that this is showing us, is pointing to. But maybe we don't need to be like running around as much. And that's the other thing I feel like it's pointing to, for me at least, is like, what can we get rid of? Or what's most important? What's the priority here? So for me, it's given me a better kind of routine because I'm not rushing around as much. And having had the cancer, that's another gift of it, is like, oh, sorry, I'm going through cancer treatment. I can't do it. It's like, you get away with that. Like nobody's going to argue. So yeah, I think with the COVID and having had cancer, it's like, what is important? And I've definitely gotten more clarity on what's important for me, like what my work is. And I actually created a little tree diagram that has the branches of what's important to me and where I'm going to put my energy. And I only allowed myself between 3 to 5, and I came up with 4. And I'm like, those are the 4. And so I try to see what fits in there, rather than trying to do everything or run around and try to make myself, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, it's like we put something in front of us and then we run after it. It's like, it's kind of unhealthy. So trying not to do that as much.
I love the example of the tree, and the branches, because you're right. We have certain values, or we have these big, rocks, as Stephen Covey would say, right, in 7 Habits. And yet, how much of our life is these big rocks versus all those pebbles that take up time and space, and yet are not ultimately important in the big picture? As you said, I mean, I will say one thing that COVID has given people, and I just heard you say this, and I've heard this from others, is the ability to say no, right? Mm-hmm. And that's huge. Mm-hmm. And then also, the ability to kind of slow down and look at what is essential. What are my big rocks? What's on my tree? Mm-hmm. I claim that X is important to me, but what am I doing to incorporate it into my life? I'm just handling email all day, Mm-hmm. And it's like that is getting you where? A cleaner inbox, great, but to what end, right? Yeah, Definitely. So great reminders.
Yeah.
And Annie, so my last question for you is the name of the podcast, of course, is Tranquility du Jour. And I always love to ask guests how they find tranquility in their everyday. And I feel like we've kind of heard a little bit about that from you with regard to your practice. So I'm wondering, is there anything else that might come up for you that just feels like really important to ensure you have every day or moments, pockets of tranquility?
Well, let me share with you something that I really haven't talked a lot about yet, but it has to do with this ancestor dream. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. So I think of it as like I would look back at old pictures of myself or my house or my kids or whatever it was, and I would look back and I would think, wow, that was a beautiful moment. Or like, wow, I really like how I decorated the house. Or, oh, or wasn't that really beautiful, this thing or this time, or the way the tree was, Christmas tree or something. And at the time, and I know when I look at that picture, I remember also at that time thinking, this is a disaster. It's like, what is happening here? And so I look back and I think, actually, that was a beautiful moment and I didn't see it. And there's something about the ancestor that came to me in this dream that to see things like that, to see things from that perspective of like, oh no, like I'm looking around right here and this is a beautiful moment. Like I can look now with the eyes that I had looking at old pictures. I can look at this moment with those eyes. And that has made a profound difference in my life. Like I just had a moment recently where one of my grown daughters was telling me something she was really not happy about from childhood. And she was crying and I was sort of crying. But I had that moment of like, oh, if I looked back at this, I would see what a beautiful moment this is, even though a huge practice for me. That's been what really has been sustaining me right now, is that ability to look at each moment with those kind of eyes. Is that understandable?
It is understandable. And I think it's beautiful.
Okay.
And I think it is, it's recognizing too, like how important it is to be present in these moments that may feel like, oh, I'm just eating a strawberry, right? It makes me think of that Pema Chodron, piece where she talks about, being the most amazing strawberry you'll ever eat, as you go over the cliff. And it's one of those things where you're just like, yes, even in these dark times, it's like, what is it like to savor, relish, and appreciate the beauty of the moment?
Yeah. Because someday we'll look back and be like, oh, there were so many beautiful things. Did I see them? So yeah, so that's what I've been practicing with.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Annie. It's always a treat to be with you.
And same. It's so good to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
So over in the show notes, you can find links to our previous interviews and a few more treats. Also links to follow Annie on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So finally, let's connect. Join our TDJ Insiders Facebook group. This month, we are reading a beautiful book by Maggie Smith called Keep Moving. Would love to have you read along. Also, if you're not yet getting my love notes in your inbox, you can sign up for that at KimberlyWilson.com/love notes. And each week I try to send a little bit of inspiration, some invites to anything that might be going on. Blog posts, podcasts, all sorts of fun things, videos. So would love to share the love with you. Also, there's a link to my 6 books and planner, ways to follow along on social, including the YouTube channel where I've got Tea with Kimberly episodes, and then a link to shop my seasonless, locally made, eco-friendly fashion line, TDJ by Kimberly. Finally, I wish you a wonderful week ahead. I hope you too have been inspired by this podcast with Annie. She's an absolute delight and one of my favorite teachers. Wishing you a wonderful week ahead. Namaste.